Welcome back to my channel. I am Brenda, and this is Reading by My Shelf. Oh, wait. Chaos by Charles Manson. Like, why are you reading books you think you're gonna hate? This is the book recommendation tag, right? So today I wanted to do a book tag. So this tag was created by StephBohrer, and I found this tag on Rachel Catherine. So this tag is called the book recommendations tag, and there are about 20 questions. So let's get into it. The first question is a book that you tell people is your favorite. I have a few that I would say are my favorite and that I will tell people are my favorite when asked, but there is one that stands out in particular, mostly because I have reread this book probably 6 times, and it is one that I will go back to whenever I find myself falling into a reading slump. I can always count on it to reignite my passion for reading because it has all of the aspects of a great book that I just love and adore, and that is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. This is a historical fantasy. It is a very big book. I think it's 800 or so pages, and it is the tale of a young girl who goes on a journey to find her father who has gone missing, and that leads her on the path of her father's own journey, in which he was searching and seeking out Dracula. So this author really did her homework when she wrote this book. So there are a ton of detailed setting descriptions as the character goes on this journey across Europe. There are scenes in France, I believe, and Switzerland, and Istanbul and Romania. There are tons of mythological nods, and it really just delves into the history of Dracula, along with the mythical aspects, but also the history of Vlad Tepes. And it's just, the prose is beautiful, the storytelling is just seductive and enchanting. I cannot recommend this book enough. If you like historical fiction and fantasy, this is a great conglomeration of both, and it is well worth the 800-page read. The next question is a book that is your guilty pleasure. So I don't have this book in physical form. I read this on my Kindle, and I have said time and time again that I am not a huge romance reader, that I do enjoy the occasional romance, and it's usually when I am kind of in that in-between where I've kind of read so much sci-fi and fantasy that I just need something completely different, an easy read, something to just get me out of my funk. And that was Credence by Penelope Douglas. So Penelope Douglas she definitely writes romance books, but they are steamy romance, and that's exactly what this is. And it is very problematic. There's lots of kind of incestuous relationships and tons of sex scenes, but nevertheless, I was completely engrossed in this book, and I think I read it in 3 sittings maybe, and it's a pretty big book. But Penelope Douglas is one of my favorite authors in this genre. So beware of the problematic aspects, but if you're looking for a steamy romance, you should give her a try. Question number 3 is a book that everyone loved but you didn't. And for this, I'm going to say The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. Now, to be fair, I didn't finish this book. I only read maybe 200 pages or so, and then I put it down. And I've heard other booktubers say that this is definitely one that, because of the way that it's told, can maybe not work for everyone, and I don't think it worked for me. I'm not saying that I won't go back to it, because I do want to, because it has just received so many rave reviews, and I feel like I'm doing myself a disservice by not picking it back up and giving it another go. I just haven't found the right time for that yet. So eventually we'll get back into the Dandelion Dynasty. Question number 4, a book that you read the fastest. So There's tons of these, but I'm gonna say for the sheer size of it and the depth of the understanding, it wasn't really an easy read in that it wasn't something you could just breeze through. You really had to kind of pay attention, and that would be The Howling Dark by Christopher Rocchio. So again, you know, I'm just a fangirl for Christopher Rocchio's books, but this was definitely my favorite one so far. It was just so satisfying. Kept you on the edge of your seat. There were so many reveals, intriguing first contact storylines. Yeah, just the amount of information that is revealed in this book and the kind of awe-inspiring, jaw-dropping reactions that I had, I would totally say that this is probably, I'm going to say this is my favorite one so far that I've read. So if you have not read the Sun Eater series, what are you waiting for? You need to. Everyone needs to. Question number 5, a book that deserves more hype. So for me, that's going to be The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell. This is a sci-fi first contact with aliens story. It follows a Jesuit priest and a kind of a crew of other people that they are his friends. But so it tackles obviously first contact, but this priest is a linguist and he is struggling with his faith. So it's kind of a journey of self-discovery as well as discovering new life and new cultures, and it's found family and is definitely suspenseful and very character driven. But I know that I've mentioned before how I very much enjoy when there are religious aspects and discussions in my sci-fi and fantasy, and this definitely checked that box, and it is a unique first contact perspective. So I highly recommend this. It's not that long. I think it's just about 500 pages. So The Sparrow, you should give it a go. Question number 6, a book that is becoming a movie or TV show. Well, this has already become a TV show, but that is The Fall of the House of Usher, which Netflix turned into a series in 2023. I personally have read The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, and I loved it. Edgar Allan Poe is really great at creating this eerie atmosphere, and he is great at pulling in a lot of literary devices that work behind the scenes that most readers may not even realize he's using, but they are certainly there. And the adaptation of this show was so well done and so creepy. It is made by the same people that did, what the heck was it? It's kind of like in that series. Yeah, I don't know. I'll find it and I will post it here. But it was super creepy, gory, horrific, definitely a bit disturbing, but you know, it was really good. Question number 7, a book that you reread the most. And I've already answered this question and I will again mention it. But it is The Historian. Like I said, I've read this like 6 times, and I am certain I will reread it again in the future. It is just that enthralling and that good and that vivid. Yeah, can't recommend it enough. Question number 8 is a book from a genre you don't typically read. So for me, I personally do not read a lot of nonfiction. I do like nonfiction. I do enjoy a good nonfiction, but it's not something that I tend to gravitate towards. And so for this, I'm going with Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. I heard about this book on Joe Rogan's podcast and immediately had to pick it up, and I did read the entire thing. It was very interesting. It is written by Tom O'Neill, who was a reporter back in the 60s or 70s, in the 70s, sorry. And he begins writing a piece, an article, and begins investigating the Manson murders. It's almost like one of those where he uncovers a darker motives, government involvement and shady aspects that went unrecognized by the public. He almost, and I don't want to spoil it, but he almost says that Charles Manson was a pawn of the government and that this was kind of a social experiment gone wrong. So this was really good, very interesting, and certainly something that I think everybody should read. I think it's always good to not take things for face value and just accept the information that's being fed to you, that doing your own research and kind of looking a little bit under the surface benefits you and everyone else. Yeah, just knowing that the media is not always the best outlet for information. So, Chaos by Charles Manson. By Tom O'Neill. Sorry, Tom. Okay, so question number 9. A book that deserves all the hype that it gets. And I hate to keep repeating answers, but, I am nothing if not transparent and honest. But The Howling Dark. It gets all the hype. It deserves all the hype. What more do you want me to say? Go read it. The next question number 10. A book you usually recommend when asked to give a recommendation. And that is going to be The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. Now, this book may not be for everyone, but it is kind of an epic historical fiction in which a boy, he reads this book and he falls in love with it, and he kind of goes on a search for any other books that this author has written, and he finds that someone is systematically finding and burning all of his books. So if you are a book lover, this one is a great choice for you. Yeah, so it's an epic story of murder, madness, and doomed love. This is a classic for sure, and I feel like it definitely needs to be added to the list of classics, right along with like Crime and Punishment, War and Peace, Jane Eyre, all of those. It's a must read for any serious reader, writer. Definitely need to pick this one up. Question number 11. A book that has your favorite characters. The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I know that people either love or hate this book and this writer, but his story to me was just so immersive, and it's got a magical school, so like it's that whimsical kind of unexpected magical school story. I love that it is a frame narrative. Descriptions are so vivid. I personally really hope that Patrick Rothfuss pulls it together and publishes book 3, because I would love to finish this trilogy. Question number 12. A book that you wish you could live in. That's going to be Under the Tuscan Sun. I am a huge fan of Italy, and this book totally transports you to Italy. It's about a woman who finds herself in the midst of a divorce, and she goes on a trip to Italy. She's kind of forced to go on this trip to Italy by a friend of hers, and while she's there, she makes the rash and just abrupt decision to buy a rundown villa in the Italian countryside in Tuscany. And along the way, she makes a bunch of friends, and she kind of finds her own independence and is reintroduced to herself. She's kind of rediscovering her identity after this kind of brutal divorce. So while it was the setting that really drew me to read this book, and the movie, if you guys haven't seen this movie with Diane Lane, I loved it. I thought it was really good. But yeah, so the setting descriptions were just lovely and magical. It certainly spawned me to send myself to Italy, which I did back in 2008. I went and I did a walking tour of the Amalfi Coast, which was breathtaking and kind of a once-in-a-lifetime dream come true. And then I went back to Italy again in 2015, and I visited Rome, Vatican City, Naples, back to the Amalfi Coast again. This was definitely, I wish I could live in this book. It was really good, and the movie is great too. Question number 13. A book you thought you would hate but ended up loving. So I don't have one for this because I generally do not read books that I think I'm going to hate. I mean, I feel like this is kind of a no-brainer. Like, why are you reading books you think you're going to hate? You don't read books you think you're going to hate. Reading is supposed to be an enjoyable experience. So why would you torture yourself? Okay. Question number 14. A book that made you cry. I have two for this. The first one is Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. I read this book many years ago, like 2011. I loved this book. I loved the romance. I loved the time travel aspect. It was very emotional and it was so good. So it's about Claire, who travels back in time, and she happens upon meeting Jamie and James Fraser. He is a Scots warrior, and this is during the Scottish War with England, I believe. 1743 is where she gets sent back to, and it's kind of their tumultuous love story, historical. It's great. They also have made it into a series. I'm sure you're familiar, but great read. Definitely made me cry. The next one that I want to mention is The Bronze Horseman by Paulina Simmons. I read this back in like 2015 or 16, I believe. And I know that many people have said this is kind of problematic and it doesn't hold up in some areas, but it is a love story that takes place right around the World War II, but it's set in Russia. And so there's this girl, she's poor, and she meets this man, this boy, and he is dating her sister at first, I believe. Anyway, they kind of fall in love, and then he gets sent to the war, and it is very heartbreaking, but I loved it. I thought it was great. Question number 15. A book you wish you could read for the first time. So I would love to read for the first time again 11/22/63 by Stephen King. This book really worked for me. I loved King's exploration of the JFK assassination. I loved his exploration of identity and how we are affected and altered by the people in our lives and how the choices that we make affect other people. And this was a surprise to me since King is known for his horror books and thriller books. And this was kind of out of his wheelhouse, but I think he nailed it. It feels so true to life, and his depiction of the past really brought it to life for me. So I highly recommend this book to anyone who ever asks a great Stephen King to read 11/22/63. Question number 16. A book that could cure a reading slump. So I know I've already mentioned The Historian, and I will say it again that I certainly have used The Historian to pull me out of many reading slumps. But also I would say Normal People by Sally Rooney. I read this book 2 years ago, I believe, and once I read this one, I read two of her other books almost back to back. Sally Rooney has a way with words and a way of really pulling her characters off the page and just making them they're so enchanting and just unexpected because they're so real and flawed and just expressive. I love how she usually does a dual perspective, and it's kind of the opposing, the two main characters who are either like kind of a love story or just a exploration of their friendship. She is a very, very talented writer, and I certainly would recommend her books to anyone. Question number 17. A book you think everyone needs to read. So for this, I'm going to say Kindred by Octavia Butler. This book, when I read it, I couldn't believe that I had waited so long. It was a masterpiece. The way she so effortlessly weaves together these two opposing timelines. One takes place in the antebellum South, where on the East Coast, where there are slaves and slave owners, and then the other timeline is in the 1970s in LA. And the way Octavia uses speech and dialect to offer these distinctive voices really creates this realistic tale. It was certainly magical and so unique. The magic system, or the way this woman time travels, I hadn't seen anything really like it before, and it really just pulled me in, and it was a very compelling story. This woman, she is a Black woman living in 1970s LA, and she gets pulled back in time, going back to this time and being a Black woman. She deals with slave owners and slaves, and having to kind of navigate her way through this tumultuous time and figure out how to get back home, and figuring out who these people are and why she's there. And it's really just a moving story, and it explores ideas of you don't get to choose who your family is, and they may not be the best people, but it doesn't change who you are ultimately. So, great read. Highly recommend. I mean, this is the book recommendation tag, right? Question number 18. A book you think would make an amazing movie. So for this, I chose Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson. I think that this would be a great movie. I feel like this would fall in line with The Lord of the Rings. It's such an epic, grand scale of a book, and there's so many point of views. I really feel like they could do so much with this story. And I'm actually kind of shocked that they haven't already made it into a series or a movie. It is definitely bleak, and it actually is a very tough read, but the payoff is so good, so great, and I just, can you imagine what they could do? I mean, look at that, even just the cover of this book. I mean, they should definitely make this into a show, a movie. Question number 19. A book you wish everyone would give a shot, even if it's out of their comfort zone. So, for this, I chose The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. Let me just tell you, I put off reading this book for years. Because I am kind of a wuss, okay? And I had watched this movie way too young, and it scarred me. I would have nightmares well into adulthood about this movie. And so, I mean, you can understand what I didn't pick this up because I was scarred. I mean, the movie scarred me. But let me just say that this book, while yes, it is intense and it is scary, but his writing, I think, really just added so much more than the movie did, because you really get a deeper look at the characters, at the relationships, where I feel the movie was so much more focused on the exorcism and the possession itself, while the book certainly deals with those things and talks about them and gives a great explanation and account of them. But the book definitely just delves more into the relationships between the mother and the daughter, the priest and the mother, the priest and the daughter. I recommend. And while, like I said, it was scary, but it wasn't it gave me nightmares like the movie did. I think it was well worth the read, and certainly I want to continue in this, because I know that there is another book or two that is a companion to this. So, okay, and finally, we're at the very last question. And if you are still here, you are a true champion. And I would love for you to leave a comment in the description box with a moon. Got that? Question number 20. A book you will never forget. I think that there are plenty of these, honestly, but I chose one that I read many, many years ago, and it is just kind of stuck with me, and it is such an important book that I really think that it should not be forgotten. That is Night by Elie Wiesel. This is an account of the Holocaust from World War II, and it is just such a harrowing, moving account and story. It's so important, in my opinion, for our young people to learn the true history of everything, of our country, of other countries, of the wars that we've engaged in, and that it should not be forgotten or crossed off the books because somebody feels butthurt about it. History is not always flowers and roses, okay? Most of history, a lot of history, are bad things happening to good people. But that's why we need it, because we need to learn from it, or else we are doomed to repeat it. Okay? I've said my piece. Anyway, I think that I will tag a few people, and I'm going to list them over here and in the description box. And I would love for you to do this tag yourself. If you happen to find it and like it, please feel free. But how do you feel about my choices? I would love to chat with you about them in the comments. So drop me a comment down below, like the video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more. I post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. See you again soon.